It was May 19th, 1977, a Thursday afternoon. The sun was warm on the cracked Oregon highway, and 20-year-old Colleen Stan was thumbing a ride south toward California. She had left her small apartment in Eugene that morning, carrying a backpack, a sleeping bag, and a simple birthday card for a friend in Westwood. The air smelled of pine and gasoline, the kind of scent that made the world feel open and harmless. By 3:45 p.m., after 2 short rides, a blue Dodge Colt slowed beside her near Red Bluff. At the wheel sat a young man, Cameron Hooker, maybe mid-20s, with neat blonde hair and an easy smile. Beside him was his wife, Janice, cradling their infant daughter. The sight of family made Colleen feel safe. She climbed in without hesitation. For the first half hour, the road wound peacefully through green valleys. Cameron joked softly. Janice cooed to the baby. Then, slowly, the energy shifted. Cameron's glances in the rearview mirror began to linger too long. The laughter died. The car filled with a tense quiet that pressed against Colleen's chest. When they stopped at a small gas station around 5 p.m., Colleen stepped into the restroom. For a brief moment, instinct screamed, "Don't go back." But when she returned, they smiled warmly, like nothing was wrong. Against her better judgment, she got back in. That single decision sealed the next 7 years of her life. By the time the sun began to sink behind the California hills, the warmth inside the car had vanished. The road stretched endlessly, lined with tall pines whose shadows danced across the windshield. Around 6:10 p.m., Cameron suddenly said he wanted to stop and explore a nearby stream. His voice was casual, but there was something sharp beneath it, something rehearsed. He turned down a dirt road, the car bouncing over uneven gravel, before stopping in a secluded clearing surrounded by forest. Janice stayed quiet, holding the baby tightly. Colleen stepped out, feeling the cool air brush her skin, unaware that this patch of forest would mark the end of her freedom. Cameron opened the trunk and pulled out a small, heavy wooden box, roughly shaped like a cube, painted black, with drilled air holes and metal hinges. He called it the head box. Before she could process what she was seeing, Cameron turned toward her with a knife in his hand. His expression had changed. No longer polite, no longer human. He ordered her to kneel. The knife glimmered faintly in the fading light. Janice turned away as Cameron forced the box over Colleen's head. The lid shut with a dull, final click. Darkness swallowed her whole. Inside, there was no light, no air movement, no sound except the faint rumble of tires as Cameron started the car again. Colleen could barely breathe. Sweat rolled down her neck as the air grew hotter, thicker. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears like a drum. She tried to count seconds, then minutes, to hold on to something, but time dissolved into noise. The last image burned in her mind was the flash of a knife and the forest sky before everything went black. She didn't know it yet, but she was being driven towards 7 years of captivity in a place no one could imagine. Under a bed, in a box, where silence would become her only companion. The car stopped sometime past midnight. The air was cold and damp when the trunk opened. Colleen couldn't see anything, the heavy box still locked around her head. She only heard footsteps crunching on gravel, muffled voices, a door creaking open. When Cameron finally removed the box, she found herself inside a dimly lit basement. The concrete walls were bare, the smell of wood shavings and oil thick in the air. There were ropes hanging from hooks, chains bolted to the ceiling, and a strange wooden frame, something she would later learn Cameron had built himself. He said nothing as he fastened her wrists, her ankles, her neck. Colleen trembled uncontrollably, the metallic sound of chains echoing in her ears. Then came the first hours of pure terror, the realization that she was utterly powerless. Upstairs, she could hear faint footsteps, a baby's cry, a woman's voice, soft, almost cautious. But no help ever came. Whoever was up there didn't interfere. Whether she didn't know, or didn't care, Colleen couldn't tell. By 2 a.m., Cameron had constructed her first prison, a wooden box under the couple's waterbed, no larger than a coffin. He ordered her inside, sliding the panels shut with a thud. Inside, there was barely enough space to move a finger. The air was stale, the darkness absolute. As hours stretched into days, the silence became unbearable. Her mind screamed, but no one heard. She began to understand that this wasn't a nightmare. It was the new shape of her world. By late summer 1977, Colleen had already lost track of how long she'd been underground. Days bled into nights. Her body had grown weak, her sense of time almost gone. Then, one afternoon, around 3 p.m. in August, the wooden panel slid open. Cameron's face appeared in the dim light. He handed her a folded paper, printed neatly in typewriter font. "It's your contract," he said flatly. "You belong to me now." The document looked like something from an office desk, full of clauses, signatures, rules. But every line dripped with cruelty. She was property. She must obey every command. Any act of defiance would bring punishment or death, not only for her, but for her entire family. Cameron said it was issued by the company, a secret organization that monitored slaves and punished disobedience. He told her they had agents everywhere, people watching, listening, even reading her thoughts. Colleen believed him. After weeks of isolation and pain, the line between truth and delusion blurred. The idea that unseen watchers could destroy her life was terrifying enough to keep her silent. Sometimes, she heard faint movement upstairs, the soft creak of floorboards, a woman's voice murmuring to the baby. But the voice never came down, never asked questions, never interfered. When Cameron locked the box again that evening, she lay in the suffocating dark, clutching the edge of her thin blanket. Her body ached, but her fear was sharper. For the first time, she wasn't only trapped by wooden chains. She was trapped by belief. The belief that escape meant death, and obedience was the only way to survive. By the end of 1977, Colleen Stan's world had been reduced to 6 feet of air and wood. The box was rebuilt, smaller, tighter, and fitted neatly beneath Cameron and Janice's bed in their modest Red Bluff, California home. To anyone walking past, it looked like an ordinary room. But beneath the mattress, hidden under the frame, lay a human being. It began as training, Cameron said. She needed to learn submission. So, by December, Colleen was confined for longer stretches. First a few hours, then full nights, then entire days. By early 1978, she was spending up to 23 hours a day inside the box. There was no light, no sound except her own heartbeat and the faint murmur of footsteps above. At 10 p.m., Cameron would open the hatch. Sometimes he spoke gently, sometimes with quiet menace. He'd allow her to eat a piece of bread, maybe wash briefly, then return her to the dark. "The company is watching," he'd whisper. "They'll know if you disobey." Janice Hooker, Cameron's wife, moved silently through the house. She fed their children, cleaned, folded clothes, always avoiding the box. Yet, some nights when Cameron wasn't home, Colleen could swear she heard Janice kneel by the bed, pausing for just a moment, as if listening to the breathing beneath the floor. Outside, neighbors recalled hearing faint tapping sounds late at night, muffled by the hum of a box fan Cameron had placed in the bedroom to circulate air. No one questioned it. For Colleen, seasons came and went without sunrise or rain. She marked time by sound, the morning cries of a baby, the closing of a door, the low drone of a car engine fading into the distance. By 1979, her mind had started to fragment. Some part of her believed she would never leave that box alive. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small, stubborn thought still flickered. The memory of open air, sunlight, and the girl she once was. By 1980, Colleen Stan had been a prisoner for over 3 years. Yet, the chains had changed shape. The physical restraints loosened, but the invisible ones, made of fear and obedience, only grew stronger. At 6:30 a.m., Cameron Hooker began his mornings the same way. He'd lift the bed, open the box, and let Colleen out. Her body, stiff from confinement, trembled as she unfolded herself. He'd order her to do chores, clean, cook, wash diapers, as Janice moved silently beside her, rarely meeting her eyes. To outsiders, Colleen looked like a quiet helper. No one knew she still slept in the box every night. Cameron told her that the company had given permission for this new phase. She could earn more air, more daylight, but only if she obeyed perfectly. He warned that one mistake could bring their wrath upon her family. Colleen believed every word. Her fear was absolute, her will carefully broken. Janice occasionally spoke to her now, short, trembling words. "You're doing well," she'd whisper while folding laundry. "Don't make him angry." There was pity in her tone, or maybe guilt, but never rebellion. By 1981, Colleen was allowed to tend the garden and even step outside, but only under supervision. Sometimes, she stood barefoot on the grass, sunlight hitting her face for the first time in months. It felt like heaven and hell at once. At 8 p.m., the day ended the same way it always had. Cameron would open the box, point wordlessly, and she would crawl inside. He'd slide the lid shut, turn off the light, and climb into bed above her. And as he drifted asleep, Colleen listened to his breathing, the rhythm of her captor's dreams, and wondered if anyone, anywhere, still remembered her name. By 1983, she had stopped asking herself when she'd be free. Survival had become her only language. By 1984, something shifted in the Hooker household. The routine, once rigid, suffocating, began to loosen. Cameron, convinced that Colleen was fully obedient, decided to test her loyalty. It was March 1984, around 9 a.m., when he first let her go outside alone. He drove her to the bus station in Red Bluff, handed her a few dollars, and said calmly, "Go visit your family. But remember, the company is watching. If you say a word, they'll kill everyone you love." Colleen's heart pounded. For the first time in 7 years, she was free to walk, breathe, and see faces that weren't his. The air felt unreal, like a world she no longer belonged to. When she reached her parents' doorstep in Riverside, they froze. She looked thin, pale, polite to a fault. Her mother asked careful questions, but Colleen's answers were robotic. "I'm fine. I'm working for a couple who needs help." That night, she smiled over dinner. It was the most normal moment she'd had in years. But even as she laughed softly at her father's jokes, she could almost see invisible eyes watching her from the corners of the room. The company was always listening. That's what Cameron had taught her. By Sunday morning, she hugged her parents goodbye, promising to visit again soon, and took the bus back to Red Bluff. Her family assumed she'd found a job and a quiet life. But when Cameron saw her step off the bus, returning willingly to her prison, his smile widened. To him, it was proof that he'd conquered her mind completely. That night, at 10:15 p.m., Colleen slid back into the box beneath the bed without a word. The lid closed. Silence returned. And in that silence, Cameron Hooker felt like a god. By mid-1985, the Hooker house looked ordinary from the outside. 2 kids, a quiet husband, a soft-spoken wife. But inside, silence had started to turn heavy, pressing down on every corner like a secret too large to contain. At 7 a.m., Janice Hooker stood at the kitchen sink, watching her husband sip coffee. Beneath their bed, she knew Colleen lay motionless in the dark box, waiting for the day to begin. Janice's hands trembled as she washed the same glass over and over. She told herself she was just following orders, that Cameron loved her, that the company was real. But sometimes late at night, she began to wonder. Cameron had grown more unpredictable, his temper shorter, his fantasies darker. He spoke about taking another slave. The thought chilled Janice to the bone. She'd given him everything, even shared his delusions. But now, jealousy mixed with guilt until it burned inside her. In early 1986, Janice began sneaking into the bedroom during the day when Cameron was at work. She'd crouch beside the bed, whisper through the wood, "Are you okay?" Sometimes Colleen answered faintly. Other times she didn't have the strength. The house smelled of damp wood and metal polish. The scent Janice could no longer stand. The nights grew longer, her dreams full of muffled screams and the sound of hammering. By late 1986, she started attending church again, sitting in the back pew with shaking hands. The preacher spoke about sin, forgiveness, and truth, words that clung to her mind like echoes she couldn't escape. And for the first time in nearly a decade, Janice began to think the unthinkable. Maybe the only way to save her soul was to end the lie that held them all captive. By spring of 1987, Janice Hooker's world had become a quiet storm. Her husband's control, once terrifying but predictable, now bordered on chaos. He was obsessed with power, with ownership, with Colleen. Every day, his voice grew louder, his eyes colder. At 8:45 p.m., Janice sat at the edge of their bed, her hands gripping the blanket. Beneath her feet, She could almost feel Colleen's shallow breathing through the wood. The thought made her stomach twist. Cameron had begun talking about expanding the company's work, capturing another woman, building a new chamber in the basement. That night, Janice tried to reason with him. "We can't do this anymore," she whispered. He glared at her. "You don't understand. This is what I was born to do." Her heart raced. She had believed his fantasies for years, believed the company watched them, believed disobedience meant death. But now, watching him smile coldly in the dim light, she saw something far simpler and far more horrifying. Cameron was the company. By June 1987, Janice's faith in everything he'd told her was unraveling. She started sneaking into Colleen's box more often, leaving food, whispering small comforts. Sometimes she prayed aloud beside her, tears slipping silently down her face. Then came August 1987. Cameron brought home lumber and metal, announcing his new plan. "We'll make a replacement. One who won't talk back." That was the night Janice broke. At 11:10 p.m., as Cameron snored beside her, she stared at the ceiling and decided that if she didn't end this, someone else would die, and their blood would be on her hands. In the dark, with only the faint hum of a fan and the muffled heartbeat beneath the floor, Janice Hooker finally chose betrayal over fear. It was August 9th, 1984, when everything finally began to unravel. The day had started like any other, hot, dry, and still in Red Bluff, California. But for the first time in 7 years, something inside Janice Hooker refused to stay quiet. At 9:20 a.m., Cameron left for work. The moment the car pulled away, Janice's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She walked slowly to the bedroom, her bare feet brushing against the worn carpet. With trembling hands, she lifted the bed frame and looked down into the darkness below. "Colleen," she whispered. "It's time." A faint rustle came from inside the box. The lid creaked open, releasing a stale, suffocating breath of air. When Colleen blinked in the light, her face was almost unrecognizable, pale, thin, and fragile, like paper left in rain. She didn't speak. Janice crouched down, her voice trembling. "You have to leave. The company isn't real." It was all him. For a moment, the words didn't register. The company wasn't real? Colleen stared at her, confusion mixing with disbelief. Every nerve in her body screamed not to trust it, not to move, not to breathe wrong. But Janice's eyes were different now. They weren't the cold, distant eyes of an accomplice. They were desperate, the eyes of someone seeking salvation. At 9:45 a.m., Janice drove Colleen to the nearest bus station. She handed her a few crumpled bills and whispered, "Go home." Colleen hesitated, still expecting sirens, explosions, punishment from the unseen watchers. But nothing came. No agents. No death. Just silence. When the bus pulled away, Janice stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the woman she'd helped imprison disappear down the highway. For the first time in years, Colleen Stan was free, though her mind was still trapped in the echo of a box. And somewhere in Red Bluff, beneath that quiet little house, an empty wooden coffin still waited under the bed, a silent monument to 7 years of horror. It was August 1984, when Colleen Stan finally stepped into a world she had almost forgotten. After 7 years confined beneath a bed in a small Red Bluff home, the morning sunlight felt foreign on her skin, and the fresh air sharp in her lungs. Janice Hooker had guided her to the bus station. With a trembling hand, she handed Colleen a few dollars and whispered, "Go home." Colleen boarded the bus, unsure if the world beyond would punish her for stepping out, if the unseen watchers of the company would strike. Nothing happened. The road stretched ahead, open and silent. By midday, police had arrived at the Hooker home. Cameron Hooker was arrested without incident, charged with kidnapping, imprisonment, and abuse. The wooden box beneath the bed, her prison for 7 long years, was dismantled, revealing the grim reality that had remained hidden for nearly a decade. Colleen was taken into protective care, receiving medical attention, therapy, and support to rebuild a life shattered by trauma. Slowly, she began to recover. She learned to walk in the sunlight again, to speak without fear, and to trust strangers. She became an advocate for victims of trauma and survival, telling her story not for fame, but to make sure no one would suffer in silence again. Even decades later, the details still chill the world. A wooden box beneath a bed in a quiet California home, and a girl who lived inside it for 7 long years.